Alright guys, so now we're going to look at an arm saddle entry which is done from a 4-point position, okay? Now a 4-point position, if you don't know what it is a back exposure position of control, okay? Obviously this instructional is centered around joint locks, looking at arm locks with special emphasis on the arm saddle, and there's a leg lock section as well. So it's not really centered around back exposure, okay? But it's important that we understand what position we're dealing with to look at how we're going to gain access to this entry into the arm saddle, okay? And also, your arm locking, it should be integrally connected, okay, with the pursuit of back exposure, because as we talked about on this instructional, the chief defensive reaction you're going to gain when you threaten an arm lock is going to be not always, one very common defensive reaction is going to be that he's going to grab his hands together, which is going to lead to your ability to get behind him. Okay, so these two things are always connected, right? The threat of arm locks and back exposure are always connected. And this sequence here is one way in which we can connect these things, okay? Pete's gonna first be in a turtle. Go to a turtle. Now, turtle, no, this way. All right, so Pete's in a turtle. First of all, what is a 4-point position, okay? So we've got a turtle, and now if he brings up his knees off the mat, but he keeps his hands on the mat, this is a 4-point position. Okay, because they stay right here, look. There's 4 points, his feet and his hands, okay? So that's what makes it a 4-point position, okay? Now, there's two main types of 4-point positions. There's one where I simply have a tight waist and no hooks in, or, come back down, or there is a 4-point position where I've got the hooks in. Now, the big weakness of a 4-point position with the hooks in, okay, is going to be as he comes up to this 4-point position with the hooks in, see how I'm sliding off, guys? Right, oftentimes you see people just slide off and over the top, okay? Now, we're gonna use that, okay, that reality of the 4-point position with the hooks in and take advantage of that sliding effect to enter into an arm saddle from this situation. Now, I'd never recommend looking for this entry like proactively. I don't think you should go out there and attempt to create this entry, because if you've got the guy's back, maintaining back exposure is usually what you want to do. But there are going to be times when you get your hooks in and he turtles up and then he builds up to a 4-point. If you have a 4-point and your hooks are in, you have two main options. You can continue to, you might not have a choice actually if he's faster than you. You can dismount and get a 4-point without the hooks in, or you can allow yourself to slide down and use that to enter into an arm saddle, okay? And that's what we're gonna look at now. So I'm gonna get the hooks in on Pete in the, however he got it, in a back exposure situation. And now here, this time as he builds up, I maintain a Kimura grip, okay? Yeah, all the way up. And now look, as I slide down, you see how I hold this grip, and then my knee comes out. Stay here, don't fall it. And I fall into this arm saddle situation. What you're gonna see is there's a process of the head popping out. Okay, when the head pops out, because, stay right here, look, keep that exactly as it is, look. As I fell down, okay, because this hand is on the mat, he needs that to maintain his base. That means when you land in the arm saddle, you're almost always going to land in an arm saddle with an arm which is not protected by the other arm. I'll come back down for a second. So, guys, remember always that there's two main ways people are going to look to defend joint locks, okay? He's either going to look to connect his hands together, or let's speak more generally actually. To defend a joint lock, someone's either going to use their secondary limb to protect their primary limb, right? If I'm gonna 50-50 with Pete, right? And I connect my legs together, right? Or he does it here too. He's using this leg to protect this leg. This is just as if I had a pin Jujigatami on you, right? And he covers one arm with the other. It's the same mechanic, right? The same basic mechanical principle. Now, if he, let go and do a hitchhiker, if he does a hitchhiker escape, right? Keep going, get all the way out. What made that work, okay? The first set of defensive mechanics was made possible by virtue of one limb protecting the other, right? It's covering it, okay? The second set of mechanics is made possible by the limb that's being attacked, not relying on the other limb to protect it, but rather movement, okay? Movement which misaligns things in such a way which inhibits the application of braking mechanics. So in the case of, like, for instance, a leg lock situation, let me have cross ashi on you. Cross ashi, yeah. If he hides his heel here, I can't get heel exposure, right? And later in the instructional, there's a whole set of ways to get through this specific problem as the offensive man, okay? But this is not relying on the secondary leg controlling the primary leg. It's relying on the action of the leg being attacked, the primary leg misaligning, okay? And now, obviously context is very key as the defensive man in choosing which of these is the most viable, the one you should go with, but understanding this distinction is very key for this situation here. Because here, so let's go back to the turtle. Okay, because here, because this hand has to be on the mat for him to build up to his base. Go. Put this hand on that too, Pete. Yeah, good. Now look, as I slide down, look what's gonna happen. He really doesn't have an opportunity to connect his hands. So what that means is when this comes out and I apply the Kimura, it's either gonna be the Kimura or it's gonna be the straight arm lock. In either case, his defensive reaction is going to be to roll. So he rolls, okay? And in rolling, turn this way. And in rolling, he's making use of the second set of defensive mechanical principles against joint locks that we looked at, which is movement, right? To misalign things in such a way to inhibit breaking mechanics, okay? So we're able to turn things here into a pin Jujigatami where you can look for the arm lock, or he may feel inclined now to employ this first set of defensive mechanics, which involves using the secondary limb to protect the primary limb, right? And then we can use that maybe go to the back, you can look for double cross face legs, or we can look for a triangle, right? All sorts of things, okay? But the basic idea relies upon making use of really what's a weakness of the forward point position with the hooks in, which just allows you to slide down, okay? And then from there, making use of the fact that it's really hard, because there's weight on this hand, it's really hard for him to connect his hands. So if he can't connect his hands, the only other defensive option he has is to, in this case, roll to, yeah, thank you for the visual, Pete, to roll to misalign things to make it difficult to apply the finish, okay? Or they might get tapped there, right? They might just tap at that point rather than rolling, right? Those are really his two options, okay? So next I'm gonna break down a few matches where I've seen this happening at a high level. All right, guys, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at some matches where the technique that I just demonstrated actually occurred, okay? The first thing I want you guys to understand about this technique is that it's a reactive entry, and it's one that I don't want you guys to envision as being like something you're going to go out into a match and proactively look to implement, okay? Because it occurs as the man looks to escape a back exposure position of control, right? So like what's happening is they're building up to a 4-point position, and you've got your hooks in, and that's sort of a situation. Typically the guy with the back exposure will slide off, okay? If you feel like you're inevitably going to lose back exposure in this situation, transitioning to the arm saddle is a really good option to continue your offense, okay? But if I could, I would always prefer to retain back exposure, okay? There might be, that's actually not always true. There are times when, let's say maybe I've scored a lot of points, I feel like I'm very dominant in the match, and I want to get the submission, and the submission from the back is not really coming, so you can transition to the pin Jujigatami, or you could transition into the arm saddle, as we're going to see here. So there are some situations where that might arise, but generally speaking, once I get the back, I want to retain it. But of course, there are going to be times when people engage in resistance to escape, and this is one common situation where people are going to look to escape, and this is a good counter to deal with that. All right. So without further ado, this is Cobrinha versus Hiroshi Nakamura in ADCC, I think it's 2009. So Cobrinha's got Hiroshi's back, and Hiroshi builds up to his base. Now let's be clear. The main advantage of exposing your own back, okay, when you expose your own back, what you're doing is you're sacrificing your ability to confront the threat that is in front of you, but you're increasing your ability to escape from the threat, right? So the advantage is a mobility advantage, okay? The defense is basically like a combat effectiveness, I should say the downside is one of like combat effectiveness, right? Like if I turn away from something, I'm not as readily able to attack that, right? But I'm able to get away with it with greater ease, right? If I'm trying to run away from something, I'm going to turn away from it and expose my own back, okay? So here, in order to regain that advantage, the great strength of the back control is that it retains all the advantages of back exposure from the offensive man's position, but okay, what it does is, and also what it does is it robs the defensive man of his greatest advantage, which is mobility, because his hips are on the mat. So what typically people are going to look to do, one possible defensive set of reactions, is they're going to try to get their hips off the mat, okay? Now, what Hiroshi does here is he builds up to a turtle, and in doing so, now his hips are off the mat and his knees are on the mat, and he's gained, obviously he's still fairly controlled, but he's gained a bit more mobility, okay? And now what we're going to see is he's going to look to continue to increase that mobility by building up to a 4-point position. See here? Now he's in a 4-point position. Both his feet and both his hands are on the mat. So he's further increased his mobility, trying to get out. Now Cobrinha senses that he's going to slide off, and he grasps that Kimura. Now we see the head pop out. Okay, that's a pattern you're going to see throughout this sequence. Okay, now here, Cobrinha. Now you notice again, Hiroshi's arms are not connected because it's very difficult to go from a 4-point to connect your hands right away. It's very, very off balancing, right? Your hands are a part of your base, right? That's what makes it the 4 points, your hands and your feet. So here, Cobrinha is going to be able to attack that arm, and Hiroshi doesn't immediately have a secondary arm to defend. Now here, Hiroshi is pushing down on one of Cobrinha's legs, which is going to help him defend, but as we're going to see in a second, it's not enough. And Cobrinha is able to get through to the arm lock finish. So first he's in a bottom Juji Gatame. And then he's going to spin back into an arm saddle. And he gets the finish here. When you go and you study the section on arm lock breaking mechanics and the cycles of the various 3 main variations of Juji Gatame, you're going to see that cycle from bottom Juji Gatame to side Juji Gatame, or arm saddle. The arm saddle is basically like the side Juji Gatame. You see it pretty frequently, and typically the next step would be Hiroshi rolling over the top to relieve breaking pressure. And then you go into a pinned Juji Gatame. So bottom Juji Gatame, side Juji Gatame, pinned Juji Gatame. That's the cycle. You don't always see it, obviously. Sometimes you see the tap in the bottom Juji Gatame. But sometimes that cycle will go, and it will go in that fashion. So there, basically, Cobrinha went back to the bottom Juji Gatame, and then he went bottom Juji. So he goes, and then look. So here he goes. Bottom. First he's in the bottom Juji. Right here, switches to the side Juji, and then Hiroshi defends. Okay, so instead of rolling, he actually back steps here. And then Cobrinha goes back to the bottom Juji, and then finishes again in the side Juji. See how here he's in an arm saddle. So ultimately it's bottom Juji, side Juji, then he goes back to the bottom Juji, and then back to the side Juji. If he would have rolled, he would have gone into a pin Juji. Okay, so now we're going to go to another match that Cobrinha had in the same tournament where he used the same technique, but he got into it in a different way. So he's on top of Joel Burgess here. And I think that's Joel Burgess. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So he gets the underhook in the deep half situation, and now he's looking for a top Kimura. This is going to be very, very key to the sequence. Right here, actually, let's keep going. So right here, Cobrinha's got so many good options. He could go for the back. He could try to spin into a cross-ashi on this leg. A lot of good options. But generally speaking, what you should always be looking for is the back. So that's what he does at first. Now, just as in the last match, just as Hiroshi built up to his base, that's what Joel is going to do here. So we see, look, his hips are on the mat. He wants to regain the mobility advantage conferred to him by the back exposure. So he builds up to his base. Look, he's got his mobility advantage once again. And you see already Cobrinha is starting to slip off. Cobrinha recognizes this. So he takes his foot, he puts it on the hip in preparation of the inevitable entry to the arm saddle that's going to be offered to him. Okay, here he could just slip and fall off and regain a closed or open guard, or he could, he's not getting the back, okay, but he can still get something good out of the situation and go into the arm saddle, and that's what we're going to see Cobrinha do here. So he comes up, and now watch as Joel continues to rise up, his head is going to pop out.
and they're going to go into like a true arm saddle. Here, Cobrinha was still trying to get the back, actually, but we're going to see he loses in, and then he goes to that arm saddle. Now watch as Joel builds up to his base. His head pops out. And that gives Cobrinha the arm saddle. And see how this hand is on the mat? Right there? That means that it's going to be difficult for him to connect his hands. He's using that as a base. Here he's in a turtle. He's not in a 4-point, but it's the same general thing. Here we go. And now as he builds up to the 4-point, that's when his head pops out. So the head pops out as he's building up to his base. And then Cobrinha is going to go. Oh, sorry. This is Hani Yahya. This is not Joel Burgess. And now Cobrinha goes and he finishes the Kimura. Hani's next step would have been the roll, but he didn't, obviously, and he got finished with the Kimura. Okay, so let's look at the last step. So right here, Hani builds up to his base. Yeah, this was the semis. Joel didn't get that far. Oh yeah, he took Joel's back. They finished Joel from the back. Okay, yeah, I'm mixing them up. So anyway, so Hani pops his head out. Cobrinha gets the Kimura finish. Here, usually the options are going to be Kimura or straight arm lock, depending on what the guy's doing with his arm. If he extends his arm, you're going to go for the straight arm lock. If it's bent, you're going to go for the Kimura. Okay. Here's another really good example from an EBI match where Dan Borovic got a very similar sequence against Kyle Griffin. He didn't capitalize upon it as well as Cobrinha did in the previous sequences, but you know he still got the basic transition from back control to arm saddle. Okay, so here obviously got a very dominant back control. Kyle Griffin, very athletic wrestler, you know, undeniably is going to want to build up to his base and regain the mobility advantage of the back control. And that's what he did right there. So the main use of your legs in a back control situation is to control the other man's hips so that he does not have the ability to build up to his base. Okay, that is going to rob him of the mobility advantage that he, you know, should hypothetically get by exposing his back. Right now, as soon as Dan takes this leg out. So Dan is going to perform a move here. I call it hip out high knee, but he doesn't. He misses one detail. We're not going to talk about that now because it's not directly related. Well, all right, I'll say it actually. I would have liked for him to take this foot and push at the knee here as Kyle built up to his base to destroy his base as he built up to it, but he misses that. And regardless, now Kyle is going to start building up to a 4-point. From this turtle. So he's got the turtle, now he builds up to the 4-point. You see the leg coming up there. Dan senses this. Says, okay, well, I lost the back. I still got the Kimura grip. I can switch into an arm saddle. No big deal. And now here, he spins, but ultimately Kyle wound up getting out. Right here, what I would have liked Dan to have done was take this leg here and thread it through Kyle's bicep. That would have given him the ability, instead of just rolling into like a guard, he could have potentially gotten a front triangle. Alternatively, what he may have wanted to do is switch into a grip on this leg here. Okay, taking this leg, thrown it over the top, and looked for a Kani Basami. That's another course of action he could have hypothetically taken. Right, easier to say when you're not in the middle of the match, but yeah. The initial entry was very, very nice. Okay, and that's what we're focusing on. He does wind up winning the match, by the way. Very, very nice triangle finish. Anyway, so now I've broken down this arm saddle example before, but I want to pay special emphasis on how Gianni Grippo uses the interplay between the arm saddle and the back control. Okay, because it's very, very nice. He goes first, got a rolling Kimura. So here he's in a T Kimura. T Kimura right here. This is This is the T Kimura right here. T Kimura, pretty much most of the time, people are going to build up to their base. That's going to give you the opportunity to potentially chase their back. That's what Gianni looks for here, but he misses it. And now as Emilio, his opponent, builds up to his base, you see the same exact sequence. He goes right to the arm saddle, okay? Now, Gianni is going to use the arm saddle to go right back to the back. So he was looking for the back from the T Kimura, okay? He missed it. Emilio, his opponent, beat him on the punch. Then Gianni's going to take the arm saddle as an alternative, and then he's going to use the arm saddle, as we see right here, beautifully to take the back. Very, very nice. Okay? Let's look at that one last time. I don't want to break this one down too long because I've already broken it down in other videos. It is just a great example of the interplay between the arm saddle and the back control, which is, you know, obviously the emphasis on the technique that we're looking at here. Okay? So T Kimura goes, first he's going for the back. He would have liked to have gotten the back here, right? He's got this here. He wants this to come over as the first hook. Then he can shift his hips back and get the second hook in. Emilio's too fast. Emilio's a very athletic guy. So he misses it, and his options are basically fall off like an idiot and lose all the advantage he had, or alternatively, switch to the arm saddle. It's not the back. It's not as good, but it's still pretty damn good. All right? And now from here, you have a multitude of options, okay? The one that Gianni winds up getting, okay, is, in my opinion, the best option. He winds up using the arm saddle to go into the back. That's, if I could use the arm saddle to do anything, that's what I'd like to use it to do, okay? And here, Gianni's able to do that, largely because Emilio's hands are connected, okay? Because his hands are connected, all right, that's going to allow Gianni to backstep into the back. If this hand was free and he could push down on this leg like we saw in other examples, so for instance, like a good one was right here with Hiroshi. Look, Hiroshi's got a free arm. Well, here his hands are connected actually at first, but he's going to open up his hands. See right there? See that left hand of Hiroshi? It's free to push. If Cobrinha tried to backstep with that leg, he's not going to have a ton of success. And honestly, then Hiroshi's probably going to have an opportunity to just like yank his arm out, and he's going to lose the position altogether, okay? That's one of the keys to the arm saddle. You've got to know how to cater your offense specifically to the situation that you're working in, okay? Anyway, hope this has been helpful, guys.